The 70th anniversary is a brilliant opportunity to celebrate the extraordinary history of this college, Newhall and then Mary Edwards. We were started by some extraordinary women who had the vision to see you don't need a queen or a king or a man with lots of money to start a college. What you need is belief and a conviction in what you are aiming to do.
It's an incredible trajectory from there to here in just 70 years. I think it was, Mary Edwards was an extremely important addition to Cambridge at that time. I think as the first women's college that started after, in fact, women were being granted degrees, it was the future. I think it had a very forward-looking kind of origin.
First, there were only 2 colleges for women. Girton, the first, founded in the 19th century, and then Newnham. And there were therefore places for a very small number of women compared with the 28 or so colleges for men.
There were some men who said it wasn't needed because there was a quota at the time of 20% for women, and there weren't enough clever women in the country to justify having a third college.
The first thing that they got, and that was a big sign of help from the university, was the land on which the college would eventually be built, and help with finding some temporary accommodation. The college didn't begin in these buildings on Castle Hill. It began down by the river in a house that had belonged to the Darwin family.
Well, it was a big old house on a corner of Silver Street, which is quite near the middle of Cambridge, really. I lived on the top floor. There were 3 rooms. Mine was the middle one, not very big. At the end of the corridor, there was a table with a kettle on. I think we made toast at our own personal gas fires. And that was all part of the, wow, magic.
The house was a beautiful Victorian house. It had beautiful rooms looking down onto the river. But the students were living in what was a very confined space for separate rooms, and indeed the public rooms that had been so elegant in the Darwin days were now necessary for things like dining halls and libraries. And there is a nice photograph of the dining hall on its first night, of course.
In the photograph, the official photograph of us all sitting there at dinner, I am the one without a gown. And this is extremely unfair because I had a gown which I'd carefully packed in my trunk, and my trunk had gone passenger luggage in advance with British Rail. But British Rail, of course, hadn't heard of Newhall, and so they obviously thought, oh, they obviously mean Newnham. And so my trunk had been delivered to Newnham, where it sat for several days before fortunately I'd brought a big suitcase with spandex and things, but no gown. So that is why I alone am sitting there without a gown.
The alumni of this college are, I think, somewhat different to the alumni of other colleges. Right from the very beginning, Rosemary Murray was looking for people with creative and original minds, and she devised this extraordinary test to see if you were actually really clever or if some bloke had just crammed you to be clever. What this meant was that those original women were different sorts of women. And they've said to me, one of the things that we always thought was that we decided for ourselves what a woman should be.
And certainly when we all got together and met, there was a feeling that, right, we can be different if we want to. No, this is, we are us, we are Newhall, Also, there was this feeling of wanting to rebuild after the war. We were very much a post-war generation, conscious of wanting to make the world kind of better. And that included making it better for women, of course, who had not had that many opportunities. So the idea of being part of a new women's college was very exciting and sort of part of the zeitgeist, really.
The first New Hall students, of course, came to this house also for their admission to the college, to their first interviews. They would arrive at this house, which had a little paper note on it above the doorknob, which said New Hall in very small letters. Rosemary had remembered to find some way to identify the house that morning before the interviews began. So nervously they would knock on the knocker, and this person would come to open the door and welcome them in, and they couldn't quite tell who she was, because she seemed to be doing everything. She seemed to be organising cups of tea for people. She seemed to be finding different people who might talk to them, and she was herself leading the main interviews. And it was, of course, Rosemary Murray, who at that point did everything. She was very much in charge of everything from putting up towel rails in their rooms, finding light bulbs everywhere, dealing, of course, with the inevitable damp. She managed everything, and she continued to do so as long as she was part of the college.
Students couldn't believe it when there was a knock on the door and it was Rosemary Murray bringing them their waste paper basket. Well, I'm not going to do that, Dame Rosemary, but I aim that we will carry on and imbue our students with the wonderful spirit which you had. Rosemary Murray was an indomitable woman. She was a resilient woman. She didn't let anything put her off what she was determined to achieve. And that is what we try to instill in our students now.
Starting something is usually relatively easier than keeping it going. And I think it's a great tribute to Dame Rosemary that it has been such a success, because I think her influence in the early days was absolutely crucial. And she had a sort of character which made it possible for a new development of that sort to sort of get going, and I think established a character which then continued, because institutions do have characters, and very often they depend on the people who started them, and they retain that character even though the individuals and the characters that are involved in it change.
When I was elected president, which was a great amazement and privilege, I went to see Dame Rosemary. I asked her if I might come and see her before I took office and find out from her how things really worked. She told me about all the problems of the college, how people would say we were young, poor and single-sex, and we had no hope of ever being a proper college. And she said a lot of things about the care with which colleges should use money. The college deliberately had no name. It was known as the New Hall, and the was left off usually, so it became New Hall. And it was left that way because she said the best way to make money is by giving people a chance to name a college. So from the beginning, we needed to look for the one big donor. There was no time to look for dozens of steady donors who bit by bit would build a college. We talked to various people about a campaign and say, this is how we mean to name the college, and this is an option for all of you. This seed had been sown in various places, and then suddenly one evening the phone rang, and Ross Smith was there, and she was saying, we're talking about the gift, and what do you feel about it? And so we quickly got on to so what would it cost? My back of the envelope, 32 million. And they're not just saying, oh, right, and putting the phone down.
For a college like Murray Edwards, know that year on year, they have that income, they have that flexibility, and that it's growing in perpetuity and will match inflation. It is the cornerstone. So for an institution like Cambridge that's 800 years old, having those endowments, knowing you'll have them for another 800 years, ensures financial stability. So being able to give them that confidence is really tremendous.
And the gift was made on the condition of total secrecy. Finally, they'd agreed, and we were going to go public. And I said, can I tell Rosemary? And they said, oh, yes. And I rushed over to Oxford, where she was already in the Radcliffe Hospital, and not well at all. And I was able to tell her the whole story. And she was gripping my hand so hard, and there was this big smile, this huge smile on her face. And it was a wonderful end of the story, end of the beginning of the story.
One of the things I really love about Cambridge is that every one of the 31 colleges is an experiment in some way. The transition from Newhall to Murray Edwards at a time when things were challenging for the college, when it was in financial difficulties. That's Cambridge's history all over the place. And then up to the present. I mean, I think that Murray Edwards is still a story that's being written.
It's very interesting to think about Murray Edwards in the context of Cambridge and how normal or otherwise it is. When the college first moved here from Silver Street, it would have been quite shocking, this white pavilion on the hilltop made out of concrete by these incredible architects who were in the process of designing and building the Barbican. It would have been a very radical place. When you walk into the library, it literally takes your breath away. There's a power and an emotion in that building that I haven't experienced in many buildings. It was very deliberate and very conscious decision to make something that was very different. These buildings were very experimental. The dome has precast concrete petals forming the roof. That hadn't been done before, and Chamberlain, Powell and Bond had to go to engineers who built bridges over roads in order to be able to achieve that. But there was something about the synergy probably between Chamberlain, Powell and Bond and Rosemary Murray at the time. There was this spirit of anything was possible, and that was reflected in the ethos of the college, and it was also reflected in the architecture. Oh, this is amazing. This is the letter of when they were appointed. And he says, we're delighted to receive your invitation and accept the appointment as architects for your new college buildings. In any case, I and my partners never undertake a commission, regardless of its size, unless we're able to devote our personal attention to both the design and the execution. But he goes on to say, before closing, may I say how much I personally value this unique opportunity to play a part in such a worthwhile enterprise as the creation of a new women's college in Cambridge. The prospect of working on this is most stimulating, and I hope you will convey to your colleagues on the Council of Newhall how much their decision is appreciated. Yours sincerely, Peter Chamberlain. I often think about the architecture of Murray Edwards as celebrating women's education. And famously, Chamberlain, Powell and Bond designed the original buildings to make you look up and to reference the aspiration that women had. The fact that the college moved here from Silver Street into this radical, forward-looking, futuristic environment spoke of such confidence about the future of women's education in Cambridge and in the world. I love that fact. We talk about confidence a lot around the subject of women's education, and that boldness, that bravery of making buildings like this to create a women's college, I've always thought was remarkable.
Occasionally, a new student will say to me, I don't think gender matters. And I say, how wonderful. And when all the misogynists and sexists in the world agree with you, then we won't need a college for women.
I do know that there is a gender disparity, for example, in academic outcomes. So women are less likely to get firsts. What is interesting about that wasn't true during the pandemic. So yes, there's something about women's experience that's leading to different outcomes. So yeah, sure, it matters, right? I mean, just right there, it matters. And I think what we know about, for example, women's underrepresentation in STEM disciplines suggests that actually women are still not fully participating in all different areas of academic life. As long as they're not, I do think it helps to have a space in which at least their gender doesn't hold them back.
I love to get the opportunity to teach so many female engineers that I wouldn't have at almost any other college. And that's like a really valuable part of my working life for me. And it's important for students as well to have that experience of working with other women, of being taught by women. And having a women's college means that all of the student societies, women do have to take charge. having that opportunity, that expectation that the female students will take charge is important. It's important to have a space like that.
I think people don't always appreciate that it is still hard to be a young woman in Cambridge and to be a woman studying a scientific subject. And women's spaces like Edwards are so important, particularly for me in science. I found it so helpful to be surrounded by other women who've had similar disadvantages being a woman in STEM. Everyone wants to uplift and support each other here, which you often don't find at Cambridge colleges. There's a culture of competition at most colleges, and I never found that here.
What colleges like Murray Edwards offer women today, even if it might seem like a very basic idea, to me it's very important, coming from a third world country, is the ability to use your voice for issues that you care about. The kind of practices that Murray Edwards engages in, including like sustainable practices, caring about the environment, championing menstrual inclusivity. These are the things that women in Murray Edwards get to talk about, and it's no longer a social taboo anymore to talk about, let's say, menstruation or period poverty. Once they realized, and people like me realized, that we have a voice, we're going to definitely use it back in our homes or wherever we want to work. And it brings our mind and attention to the social side of things apart from professional development.
Murray Edwards was my first option because I really wanted to be in a women's-only college. I'm very proud of the feminist history of the women's colleges in Cambridge. It's challenging being a mother of two and pursuing education at the age of 45. Obviously, the age doesn't help as well. So I always mention Virginia Woolf, and that she talks about having a room of your own. And that's how I feel at Murray Edwards. Like, I do have the means to pursue my study. And that means not only the space, the physical space, but also the funding, that I have funding from the college, a scholarship to cover my PhD costs. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. We need a room of our own.
I still find when I go out to schools that girls say, could I get into Cambridge? Would Cambridge really want me?
So I applied to Newhall because it was a very open college and a very welcoming college. I came from quite a small Scottish comprehensive school, and I was quite apprehensive about coming to the University of Cambridge, definitely. And of course the education system in Scotland is slightly different, and so I phoned up lots of different colleges in Cambridge asking them what I would need in my Scottish advanced hires, and none of them could tell me except Newhall. Newhall was the only one that could answer the question straight away on the phone, and they knew without hesitation what I would need to get in. So I thought, okay, I'm going to apply there then.
I think what this college for me sort of stands for, or is a kind of counter Cambridge College. That you have this art collection which really does explore the problems of an idea of a canon, or of a particular kind of history that has always been kind of dominated by men and written by men. And I think that is also really important in terms of being a college for women, as about giving a kind of different story that needs to be heard. So there's this sense of an amazing spirit of generosity that you can feel at various kind of touch points across your experience of visiting here. And so for me, that just feels like such an important story.
Cambridge colleges, everybody has an idea in their head about what Cambridge colleges should be. It's like this Harry Potter type place, right? That has never appealed to me. It's all about looking in the past. I'm always looking to the future. That's what excites me. And to me, Murray Edwards seems like it's got the same focus. It's looking towards the future. And many people in the college seem to me to be imagining a better world, so that things are better in the future than they were in the past. So I like that forward-looking attitude, and I think that's very special to Murray Edwards.
We are also a very different sort of place. It's so open and so airy. It's so pleasant to walk about. I can't tell you how wonderful it is to live in an art gallery.
The Women's Art Collection is Europe's largest collection of art by women that's on display all across Murray Edwards College. We now have over 600 artworks, and the collection is absolutely everywhere, from the accommodation blocks to the walkways to the art cafe to a kind of dedicated gallery downstairs. We achieved museum accreditation in 2018, which I think really acknowledges the importance of the collection, the fact that we are open to the public every day, that we now adhere to kind of museum standards. And so that was a really important moment for us. And it was an opportunity for us to think about our collections focus and also just slightly more kind of refine our vision, perhaps. I don't want to speak on behalf of the students, but what I really hope is that what they find with this collection is a kind of perfect visual representation of what the college stands for, about promoting women, about offering spaces for artists from all backgrounds, being open to the public, being inclusive, and the specificities of the collection, which are really remarkable.
And all the time, students tell me how much it means to them to have these wonderful, relaxing gardens. And our marvellous current head gardener, Caitlin, makes a maximum opportunity of the fact that gardens are key to well-being.
We like to think of it as the students' garden, really. It's like their back garden. So it is a community space. I tried to think about when I was young and what I would have liked to see. And so I just think more flowers. I just always want to plant more flowers. Just make it really beautiful for them. The students benefit here because we take quite a relaxed view of the gardens in comparison to other colleges. So, for example, here the students, they can walk on the grass. We also grow a lot of plants, a lot of bulbs, so things like tulips, daffodils, and the students can pick those and take them to their rooms. That's really lovely. You do see people walking about with little bunches of flowers, and we encourage that.
As we all know, Cambridge can be an incredibly stressful and busy place. The fact that the gardens are so beautiful and there's so much greenery around allows like this element of wellness and this element of home that it's just not like anywhere else. I'd say that we have some pretty world-class gardening, which is really lovely to see. Like, I very often do like pick flowers for friends. Like, these are the beginnings of a bouquet that is for my friend who's in the opening night of a play. Genuinely, I feel like this is such a lovely space and such a joyful space.
At Murray Edwards, there is that sense of sisterhood amongst us as students, where everybody's just willing to help each other, to give each other things if it's necessary, if it's needed. There is that support within the college community, whether it be peer-to-peer or staff to peers. So like even just being able to go talk to the porters at any point of the day, it's a massive highlight of being at Murray Edwards College.
At Murray Edwards, the porters should always be approachable, friendly and knowledgeable. Hopefully that won't change in 70 years' time, and that's the way it should be.
We have inherited a vision of women's education, but it is our duty to go to the next step. Our dream is that people will come from all over the world to see how you can create an institution for women which has academic excellence right up there at the top, but also cares about the whole woman. All of that is because of the history of the women who founded this college and the generations of alumni whose lives and careers inspire them.
One of the advantages of being Murray Edwards, of being just 70 years old, is that you can do Cambridge your way, right? You can decide which pieces to take forward of the tradition. And yet Murray Edwards is very Cambridge. Just the fact of it being an independent community, the independence of the college, ability to go your own way, that's a very Cambridge idea. You're part of this unbelievable history, right, that's still going on. And the still going on part is what you can contribute to once you're an alum.
Well, I'd say coming from the perspective of being here in the 70th year, it's really lovely to see how the college has developed into a really established space. And a really accepting space, not just for its students, but also for the wider Cambridge community, establishing herself as somewhere where women really have a place that is incredibly primary.
For the future, it's really promising as well, because there are, with so many global issues, what women require is a platform to voice their opinions and be the future leaders. I think this college is really promising for future students as well, to have a community sentiment and to grow together and to understand very global issues. Take it on them, on their shoulders, to be future leaders of the world.
It's got a lot of life ahead of it. It's not fulfilling a 19th century Red Gothic dream. It's not trying to be anything of a certain time or century. It just is. And it's free, I think, to be whatever it wants to be. I remember one very, very stern possible development director saying, I don't think you could raise more than £60,000 for this college. How on earth could you see it as something? And I say, I see it as a beautiful dream that one can hold in one's hand. It's a jewel. It's a jewel in one's hands, and it can be absolutely anything.